Hi, I'm Harry.
And hi, I'm Ricky.
And we're here today with Jamie Allan.
Hello.
How old were you when you first decided to become a magician?
Ricky, I was 5 when I first... Most magicians will tell you they got a magic set for Christmas, but my mum and dad used to run a cabaret theatre. So when I was a kid, they wanted me to go to school to a nice place, so they stopped touring because they were in show business. So they bought a little pub, like an old pub, and they knocked the lounge and the bar into one room and built a little theatre in there. And I did my first show there when I was 8, but I saw a magician come there when I was 5. Who did a trick where he made a lady float on the back of 2 chairs, not dissimilar to these actually, and he made this lady float, and I thought it was amazing because I knew that there was no wires because it was like my house, and I knew the lady because she used to come into the place all the time, so I thought it was incredible. And my dad knew how it worked because he had done a lot with magicians in his life, so he explained it to me, and I thought that was amazing. So I was 5, you know, when I started, but I did my first show when I was 8.
What made you want to become a magician?
I think it was the idea that I was more interested in the way something worked, like the mechanics behind it. I found that absolutely fascinating, much more so than just watching tricks. I was really interested in the way the props were constructed, the sleight of hand, and I was also interested in why it fools somebody, the sort of the science behind it, as much as I was the tricks. That's always why I wanted to do magic. I just found it, you know, it's just a great hobby. Yeah.
Does anyone else in your family practice magic?
Well, I'm an only child, so no. I have a little son now, and he doesn't do any magic yet. He's too young, and so no. My mum was a singer, and my father was a songwriter and a musician. So my aunties were dancers, and my uncle was a comedian. So there's a lot of people that did show business in my family, but no. My grandmother was a professional singer. But I was the only magician, the only variety act actually, you know, because they're all linked, you know, jugglers and ventriloquists, they're all very close to each other, but I was the only magician. Yeah.
Who's your inspiration, and in what ways is your magic influenced by them?
Well, it's very funny for me really, because I do a very modern show where I use, particularly the new touring show, where I use a lot of technology. So I do a lot of tricks with lasers and iPads and flat screens and holograms and this kind of thing. So you'd think I would say all the modern stuff, but actually I get all my ideas from things from the past. So I like Harry Houdini, which nearly everybody's heard of Houdini, even though he died all this time ago. And I think I would have to say Harry Houdini, because every year since he died he gets more famous, and people that are around still today, I would say David Copperfield I think is still the best, and now of course I get more inspiration from people like Steve Jobs, or guys from, you know, that have meant something, been visionaries. I find as much inspiration from them as I do any magician.
Have you ever wanted to be anything else but a magician?
No, I never have. I have worked in other things within magic in my life. I've produced other magic shows for people, and I've directed other magicians, and I have produced magic tricks that other magicians have bought off me. Some famous magicians have bought some of my magic. So it's always been around that, you know. And I've worked in TV and theatre and directed some. I wrote a musical about Houdini as well, which is not really being a magician, but no, I've never done anything else really.
Your show, I'm Magician,
yes,
uses modern technology, as you said, to create magic. How do you think technology will shape magic in the future?
Well, magicians have always used technology since the dawn of time. Every magician has used they've always found new technologies, like when the television first came out. Magicians were, before it was mainstream, were using it as a trick, but not revealing that they were using the technology. Robert Houdin was a famous French magician, and he used electromagnets when they were first invented, and he used to put an electromagnet, a plate under the stage, and use a chest with a steel plate in it that would get locked to the floor, so he could put the box down and he could show how the weakest person in the audience could pick this thing up, but then he would get the strongest guy up and pretend that he was going to take away his strength, and he would get him to say if you could lift the chest, and the guy couldn't because it felt like it was bolted to the floor, because of course it's not a problem to reveal this because it's so old, but it had an electromagnet in it. So that was an example of them using technology but not saying anything about it. The only difference with me is that I openly say I've got the technology, and I use the technology as although it's the star of the show is not tricks done with technology, it's magic where the technology is the subject of it, yeah. If that doesn't sound complicated enough.
How do you prepare for a big tour?
We start with just creative meetings with the guys. We throw all the ideas that we'd like to do, and then as it gets closer we start throwing most of those ideas away because they become impractical or we can't work out how we can achieve it every night. And once we've got a nucleus, I have some great members of my team, like Tommy Bond, who does a lot of my technology stuff, and my manager Joe, who's standing behind the cameras over here, and you know, our close team of people. We decide the content of the show, and then we audition for the cast, the people that are in it, the girls. Though we use the same people now again and again because they're all very good, and we you know, we hire a rehearsal space, and it's a very long process, and it's two-sided really, because you've got, when it first starts we all go in the same room, you know, we're all working on the show, but then the whole team splits, and then Joe, his responsibility goes to marketing the show and selling the show and talking to the theatres about the show, and then Tommy goes off talking to the theatres about the logistics of what's got to come in that day and talking to the team, and I go into organising the actual magic, you know, and then only at the very end do we come back together again, you know. It's a very long process, it's a big process.
How do you like pick certain tricks, like go in your shows? Is there like a criteria they have to meet?
No, I try to have variety. You know, we want things that are, in this year we've got, you know, we're closing with a death-defying stunt, and when we're using technology it mustn't seem all the same, so I try not to have too many things. I try to have some comedy, a lot of audience participation, and we start with a list, and then we try and arrange the order, and we take certain things in and certain things out until it just feels. And we keep changing it actually, because we'll do the show one night when we first start the tour, we'll do the show, and then we'll probably by 3 nights later we will have changed the order, and we listen a lot to the audience and try and work out when the high points are. You know, you don't want things to be people to be too excited all the time, and then you drop down, you know, it's like a ride, you know.
What tips would you give to a budding young magician?
I would tell them to read books, because most magicians now learn all of their magic from the internet. People that are coming up, they go into magic shops or online magic shops and they buy whatever's the new trick, because there's a lot of hype around that. People say, oh, this is the new thing, you must have this. And that's usually just people trying to make money from it, and all the best knowledge is hidden away in these dusty old books, thousands of them that nobody ever reads. And there's a wealth of material in them and nobody even knows it's out there, and I would say read about it, because all the best tricks are in the past and just need rethinking and reinventing.
Is there any particular way like you brainstorm your tricks, and like how do you think of them?
Well, we start with the concept of what we're trying to do. The hardest thing when trying to come up with a magic trick is not the method, because you can always find a way to do it. It might depend on, you might not always be able to do that method because it might be either too expensive or too impractical to do in a venue, but there'll always be a way you could do it. So that's not the hard part. The hard part is trying to decide what the effect is going to be. What are you going to do? What original concept are you going to come up with for a trick that people will associate with? And that's the hardest thing. So that's the process, is trying to come up with just an idea for what on earth could we do? Not how we're going to do it, we'll deal with that later. Yeah.
What do you think has been your best ever trick?
Oh, it's been whatever has been the big thing at that time for me. I mean, I used to make a helicopter appear at the end of my show, and when I used to do that, that was the biggest thing that I'd ever done, so at the time that was the best thing. I get a lot of comments about some smaller magic that I do, and the audience say, well, that's the best thing. The iPads, when I did that, I did, you know, 3 big TV shows, one after the other with it, so that was obviously a good trick because that got a lot of response. So it keeps changing, that question. Yeah.
What are you planning after this tour?
We have some new ideas for some new magic that we're going to do. We will probably bring Magaician into London. And then we will leave it in London for as long as that will be, and then after that we may go overseas with it for a short time, and then we will stop Magaician and we'll do our new show, which I know what that new show is and I know the concept of it, We don't want to say what that is yet, because we don't want anybody to steal that from us.
You must get a rush from performing to the masses. What has been the best show that you have performed to before?
The best show I ever did was the one that meant the most to me at the time was when I first did the London Palladium. When I was that was about 10 years ago. But it meant the most to me at that point in my career because it was a very, very famous theatre, and it was everybody that had ever you could think of had performed there. And so when I did a show there, that meant the most to me because I was young, and now I work in big theatres all the time, and I do television a lot, and the first time you do live TV is very exciting, but TV is not that exciting to do because you're just in a small room with cameras, so it doesn't feel like a big audience, you know. But I actually prefer, now I'm a bit older, I prefer the smaller theatres. I like the intimacy of doing big illusions very close to people. They can't believe it because the bigger the audience, the more distance they are from what you're actually doing.
What would you say is the best reaction you've ever had to like a particular trick you've done?
The most surprising reaction I ever had was for the routine I do, which you may have seen, Harry, I think, where I have the drawing of the magician on the back of the cards. That traditionally gets one of the biggest reactions for any trick that I do, and I was always surprised by that because it's very, very simple. But the way that I present it, it gets one of the biggest reactions because it's a very good trick, and the scale of the trick doesn't matter to the audience's reaction. The audience judge something off of whether they're impressed by it or whether they're not impressed by it. They don't care if it took 20 people and a whole truck to put it there. They only care if it meant something to them or not.
How do you get noticed in the magic world? Was there a particular trick that made you stand out?
The iPads trick has no doubt been the one that made me, to magicians, the one that I was noticed the most for, out of anyone I've ever come up with. I mean, I've always been known by magicians because there's not many professional magicians, but and the ones that are working, we kind of all know of each other or know each other. So I would say the digital art, the iPads.
And finally, how would you describe your job as a magician in 3 words?
A magician in 3 words? You've saved the hardest question till last. How would I describe it in 3 words? It's very difficult to describe anything that I do in 3 words. Because being a magician is not about tricks. It's to create wonder, you know, which is 3 words, but it's not. It's a sentiment. It's not about how is something done. It's just about how it makes you feel, and it's just about making you believe in magic. So it's to believe in magic. That's it.
Thank you, Jamie, for your time.
Thank you for asking us down here. Thanks very much.